Welcome, everybody, to the American Space Museum. I'm Mark Marquette, and you're here to stay curious with Dr. Al Koller. Welcome to our Stay Curious set, Dr. Koller.
Thanks, Mark. It's really a privilege to be here. Thank you very much.
Well, Dr. Koller is a fixture here at the American Space Museum. He has been involved with this place since its inception and has been on all kinds of service for us here. And you're going to enjoy a great conversation with somebody who at age 17 started working at the Cape.
Yes, sir.
And we've got a lot of slides to show you here about this man's career, but I've got some questions or get him to be more insightful and introspective about what's happening today in our new renaissance of space. And he's a great community leader and was not only involved with Kennedy Space Center, but a local community college for years. And you're wearing a Space Tech shirt there to celebrate a company he founded that certifies aviation and aerospace workers. And of all the things you've done, I don't know what you'd be most proud of, Dr. Koller.
Well,
is there one thing that sticks out? Space Tech, your Brevard Community College, or your NASA career?
A little bit of all. It would be hard to pick the best, my favorite one.
Well, as I'm painting the picture here, you're going to hear a story from an extraordinary man that's done a lot of neat things and done a lot of good for a lot of people. And this conversation is made possible by the Marie Louise G West Endowment that we were privileged to get from Laura West and Charlotte West Pietenpole. Specifically gave our museum $5,000 to do oral histories. And we are certainly done a lot of those and grateful to them for supporting our nonprofit. We used the money well to buy some equipment we needed to make our programs better. We've got Marty Winkle, my co-producer and cameraman for a year and a half of Stay Curious, is doing our audio and camera today. Jessica Galloway, our Trekkie Techie, she's taught us these old dogs new tricks, how to make this look more professional and better. And we know that you are all enjoying it on YouTube, Facebook Live, and something called Twitch, Dr. Koller, that is a platform for gamers that's very popular. So we hope that you like us. Pardon me?
NASA had a Twitch.
Oh, NASA has a Twitch. So we have to Twitch too, Jessica says. So please like, share, subscribe, follow us to get our followers up to monetize our social media for this wonderful nonprofit. And again, tell your friends to go look at our past conversations. We've done 6 or 7 astronauts, over 40 KSC and Cape Canaveral space workers, and another handful of some entrepreneurs here, which, by the way, while I'm thinking about it, I always admire, Dr. Koller, your entrepreneurial skills in being one of the Space Coast vendors that has always tried to sell good things to the public out there. From magnets on your refrigerator to this beautiful little Apollo 11 drive. Everything you want to know about Apollo 11, pictures, documents, everything is on this. And then Dr. Koller also proudly, I know, has done this little book about exploring space, taking the Kennedy Space Center, Cape Canaveral story on a nice little booklet here that you've made available for free to the masses, correct?
I have. If you're interested at all, you can go to exploringspace.info and get a free copy. 60-page book. Gives me a nice segue to say how pleased I am to be on this show and how honored I am to be among the leaders and the pioneers who've made all this possible for us. This is my 61st year in aerospace.
Wow.
And my father worked in aerospace before I did, obviously, and his first pamphlet, from which this book was derived, was about 12 pages. Done at home on a printer, carried into the museum at the Air Force because we didn't have this museum at that point in time. It would have been pre-NASA, in fact, and because of him, I ended up at Texas when he did the B-57 aircraft for the Martin Company, and then in Denver when he did the Titan, and then in Florida when Titan moved here to begin its tests. And I did my final year in high school here in Titusville in 1959. At that time, Titusville was about 5,000 people, and I guess I'd like to just leave you with some thoughts today about how much change has occurred over the last 60-plus years. 5,000 people, nobody locked anything. Everybody knew everything.
Right.
Nothing was open on Sundays. And the town closed down on Wednesdays at noon, and everybody went fishing. And that's just not.
Is that right?
Yes, it's true.
Wait,
Bring that back.
and what were you? Yeah, let's bring that back for sure.
Life was very different. It was a slower time, but
Tell the fishermen out there what kind of fish you were catching in the Indian River, I suspect.
we were fishing in the Indian River and catching sea trout.
Sea trout.
And we had a beach before pads A and B, which are now where Titusville Beach used to be. And I would go out there and take a fishing rod with a lure and never came home without a fish. So a lot of history there and a lot of change at the Kennedy Space Center over the last 60 plus years.
Okay, we got to do a tech sound check
Can
here.
I have you scooch under the table a little more?
All right.
Oh, there we go.
That better?
Mike.
There we go.
Okay.
Make sure that our audio is as good as we can get it. Thank you, guys.
Well, you're getting a good taste of Dr. Al Koller, and I got this to say about this gentleman. I'm not sure I would be doing Stay Curious right now if it wouldn't have been for you and some of the mentoring that he's done for me. And I know that Al Koller saw in me somebody that was immediately passionate about this museum, just like our executive director, Karen Conklin. She's the one that gave me the germ. But I mean, you are I respect you as a father figure and a gentleman that a lot of us should admire for the way he's lived his life and his beautiful family. And it's always been my privilege to be around some of your family in there. But I mean that heartfelt, that I'm not sure I would be here had you not been in my corner for the last 3.5 years, kind of seeing from the outside what this crazy mix of a Buckeye hillbilly from Tennessee with a little bit of knowledge can do.
Well, hey, let me just kind of reciprocate and say, because of you, the museum has carried itself forward through the last 2 years, year and a half or so, of just a disaster for the world. That pandemic has set everybody in the world on their ears, and I was surprised and pleasantly surprised when this program, the Stay Curious, and the Facebook and the YouTube pieces kept us in the public eye. It was very, very important. It has carried us through. We're doing very well. And now we're about to break out into a new era in aerospace. And I will tell you that it isn't a lot different than what I saw around 2004 when the commercial space guys first really came to the fore. And it just didn't pan out very well at that point in time. It was a big, big setback. A number of organizations went out of business. Some of you will remember organizations like X-Corps, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess what I'd like to maybe plant the seed, think about, let me see if I can put it into 3 words: scale or size, speed, and sustainability. If I had to name the things that were most important to how we got from where we started to where we are now, those would be the 3 areas. I was in high school here and I had a science fair. I think it was probably the first one that Titusville had ever had. And I had a rocket display, and I think we have a picture of it.
There we do.
And it was a display. Now that was the prize that I got. That's a Jupiter model, a very high quality one. That's General Barclay on the right-hand side of the picture of me, and on the left hand is Bob Gorman. And they were from the Army Ballistic Missile Agency, Redstone Arsenal, Alabama, Huntsville.
Wow.
And because of that gaseous rocket model, which really didn't work very well, but it was all pretty nicely documented.
Yeah.
I got a job offer for the Army Ballistic Missile Agency at the age of 17.
Wow.
And
Age
I
of
went out to
17.
work that summer, the summer of 1959, at the Cape. And you might recall that in January of 1958, that organization, Army Ballistic Missile Agency, ABMA, let's shorten it up, launched Explorer 1, our first satellite, into orbit successfully. And I think we have a picture of that as well. It's probably
What was the one? Let me go back here. We didn't want to miss this other picture there. There's you at your science fair project.
That's the
there.
science fair project. Pretty well documented. And you can see a couple
Right.
of gas bottles.
Right
and,
out of Leave It to Beaver, folks. There, he's got the cardigan, the haircut.
Well,
But
that's
you know
right.
what? The hairstyle's back in vogue, and I know you're glad to see that. With all those hippie long hairs.
Oh gosh, a lot of changes taking place.
A lot
Not
is taking
just- Not
place.
just in aerospace, as you can see.
So you were, because of your father, you were interested in ballistic missiles, and before I let it pass, guests at our museum get to see on the wall now what we call the Koller Cape up there, where you and your father built a working model of Cape Canaveral and Cape Kennedy, with where it looks like a landscape, and then they mechanically the rockets come up out from the ground using, I understand, everything from windshield wiper motors to Radio Shack parts to whatever. on that.
All stepper switches and mechanical.
And it's 50 years old out there,
electromechanical-
Dr.
I know
Koller.
it
You
is.
and your,
Yep.
your dad did that in
No, he,
60 years old.
that-
Yeah, 61.
That's right. It's about 60 years
Yeah.
old. He would have done the map and went around to the schools teaching
Wow.
space history from the early days. And that map exists here at this museum thanks to the people who took care enough to preserve it. The big map is now gone, but its successor, I understand, is in development out at the visitor center, and we may get to see a holographic version of that map. The value there is to see the chronology, to go from the very beginning and keep in mind size, speed, and sustainability. And that's what I want to show you a little bit of. Let's go to picture 4.
Yeah,
if we
let's
can.
go to
Not that one.
not that one. I want to go back to this. No, here we go. Here, that's there we go. There we go. There's
Should be the one right after that. There we go. That
Yes.
is Explorer 1. To give you an idea of the size, remember Sputnik launched 4 months earlier, and what it did was beep. This, and by the way, one of the gentlemen that's von Braun there on the right-hand side of my
Von
right-hand
Braun,
side.
and the middle guy is Joseph Allen.
Dr. Van Allen.
Dr. Van Allen in the middle.
And that Explorer satellite.
And, Pickering is the guy on the other end.
That's
there.
right. That satellite discovered the Van Allen radiation belt circling the Earth. We didn't know there was a radiation belt.
Right.
So it was a real piece of science.
Van Allen expected it, and he was an Iowa physicist, and this put him on the cover of Time magazine. Time magazine, folks under 40, was like so big social media. I mean, biggest tweet or TikTok of all, or whatever you want to call it on there. But very famous picture. As a photographer, I've seen the movie of this, of course, and this only happened for about 3 seconds, and then they set it back down. You're thinking they'd be, "Hey, we did it, man, everybody!" And they set it back down.
But you can see it wasn't a real big
No,
payload. Now,
Just like Sputnik, wasn't too big.
Sputnik was the size of a beach ball. Yeah.
remember size. I'm going to talk about that a little bit.
Size, speed, and sustainability.
This is at the Cape itself, Launch Complex 26. It's a blockhouse, and believe it or not, there are windows in that blockhouse. There are actual windows. Those windows are like 15 panes thick, 15 different panes, all glued together.
Are they those?
And that's how they saw the rockets. And if you look to the left of that picture, you'll see a cable trench with the covers. And it is from the blockhouse to the launch pad, 400 feet.
Wow.
400 feet. Now, the next picture should be the firing room itself.
Sorry. Yeah. There we
There
are.
we go.
Okay.
And by the way, you know Ike Ridgel. He's the guy on the left-hand side
Yes.
of the picture. And Terry Greenfield is in the middle, I think.
Ike Ridgel is going to be 98 years old, and we miss him and his wife at the museum, autographing his book, Ike. But he would show his face frequently.
I think this one, though, is probably Pad 5 or Complex 5-6, not 26. They were identical. And ABMA launched from both of them. See the windows on the right? And you see some very early shots at being a computer on the left-hand side. Imagine that what you did to program those was a punched paper tape that ran on a reel.
Wow.
And it had a light source that shined through the holes, and a detector that could detect.
A light source shining
light
through the
source,
detector.
Ones and zeros.
Now, one of the
Did you have to worry about the Chad?
And no,
yeah, the
it was
hanging
too early
chads.
for chats. Go back to that one just a minute. If you look, and you're from the position where the test director or the launch director would have been.
Okay.
And you can see the switches. And keep in mind now, there were no iPhones, there was no Wi-Fi. Everything there, all those switches, gauges, and so on, had individual wires that ran from the blockhouse out to the pad.
Wow.
And they went through a terminal panel up on the wall behind you. You can't see it in this picture. And all of those wires, and there were thousands of them, were hand-tied and hand-crimped by technicians. And I got to have one of those jobs. Now, my very first job, remember the trench?
Yes.
Okay, 400 feet.
And why is it so close?
Well, because it could be. Because you lose.
Electricity
signal.
didn't
You lose-
conduct
you lose
that
signal.
far.
That's right, you lose signal.
Barely over 1,000 feet could you get electricity conduct on a copper line?
Go
right?
back one more time to that one.
Uh-huh.
Behind Ike and Terry is a scale.
Okay.
And it's a mechanical scale. So there was a actual balance beam that went from the blockhouse out to the pad, down through that cable trench.
Wow.
And guess what they used it for? The Redstone, which we'll see a picture of
Redstone rocket
in
now.
a minute, used liquid oxygen, which is a cryogenic, very cold,
Mm-hmm.
and alcohol. Well, we knew how to measure alcohol, but we didn't know how to measure liquid oxigen. So they would weigh how much was in the vehicle by the weight. You knew how to add fuel,
Is that
or
right?
add oxidizer rather, to
You believe that, Marty?
It's
Using a scale like that but
Top
it's
it
sort of
off,
like
that's how you-
kind of like, an Archimedes moment there, where
Yes.
you fill the bathtub and my body's.
it was
Huh.
very crude by today's standard, but it was pretty darn effective, and
It worked.
it worked, and it got us that first satellite.
There's that scale again.
Now we're looking at the blockhouse that would have been, I think, Alan Shepard, and we'll talk about him in a minute. What's the next picture? Let's take a look at the next. That's a scale.
Okay.
And the windows you can see.
Wow.
Okay, they're real, all of them. Next, that's Dr. Debus.
Davis in the center. Von Braun is in the
Yep.
beside him to the right there, and that's not Medeiros.
No, I don't know
think.
which. I don't know which general that would have been.
I
But
was
keep in
telling
mind
Dr.
again.
Koller, I like General Medeiros was quite an interesting guy in early space age, and he was the general over the Cape Canaveral, wasn't he?
Yes, and now look at all those little switches and so on. This is the launch crew. The
Yeah.
next picture's launch crew. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Now keep in mind this is the size. That's the entire launch crew for that vehicle,
Wow.
basically.
There's
Okay.
Von Braun up in the upper right-hand
Yep.
corner. I can see him.
Yep.
This is for Explorer. This is for Explorer 1.
No, I'm
Or,
not. No, I think this was probably
Shepard.
No, this was probably. I don't know.
So you see some of these consoles are similar to what we have in our Cape Canaveral gallery, and the headsets and so forth. This is all pictures that we look at to verify things are what they are when they come to our museum.
But that is the beauty of this museum, and pardon me if I brag a little bit on them, but they deserve to be bragged on. They have managed to preserve these artifacts. The very earliest days of the American space program, the first time we got a satellite successfully into orbit, the first time we got a human being essentially in a suborbital, because Redstone was a weapon system.
yeah.
It was a surface-to-surface weapon system from the Army. It had a range of about 200 miles. Keep in mind, I said size is a big deal.
Right.
So we're talking here 1958, 1959, 1960, that time frame. Let's take a look at the next picture. They tell it better than I can anyway. The one after
Yeah.
that, keep going. Keep going.
Other way.
Oh, I'm going the wrong way. Sorry, there we're
okay.
messed up. I had a question on my mind and it slipped.
Oops,
I
sorry.
was thinking of the.
All right. Now, this is the Redstone.
Yes.
Sitting out on the launch pad, 400 feet from the blockhouse. I want you to look at the bottom of that, underneath the vehicle. Do you see that little pyramid-shaped object?
Yep.
Guess what that is?
The blast
That's the flame deflector.
flame deflector.
Keep that in mind, because in a little while we're going to see the flame deflector for the Saturn V, and I will tell you, I'll ruin it in advance.
Yeah.
This guy is probably about 12 inches high.
Yeah.
The flame deflector on pad 39 for Saturn V would have been 57 feet.
Wow.
Size.
Wow.
Size.
Now, when you were hired as a kid, let's just talk a little bit about the people that are a little young. In 1959, 17 years old, we were in the heat of the Cold War.
Yep.
And Soviet Union was the big bear enemy, and me as a kid was learning how to hide from a nuclear blast under our tables,
Yes.
as if that was going to help anything. So I mean, so we cannot. You were here, you came in at the era of the Cold War, and Cape Canaveral. All of those launch bases we're going to see here in a minute were to have nuclear-tipped weapons on them aimed at Cuba and Soviet Union and other places.
Or whatever.
Am I right?
Yes.
So 17 years old.
Yes.
How'd you feel about that?
Afraid
Okay, well, that's honest.
that I would never be able to cut the mustard. But guess what? They treated me like family. And I'll show you in a little while an artifact
Right, yeah.
that tells you that I went in as essentially an intern, as a technician. It would have been an electronics or electrical technician. And my first job, believe it or not, was to climb down in that cable trench that I showed you.
Mm-hmm.
They tied a cable around my waist, because when you get to the pad surface, there's no doors. You're now in a cave. It's about 4 feet high and about 2 feet or 2.5 feet wide, and it's dark. There's no lights or anything in there. They're just cables that run.
17, you were
Yeah.
That's right. And so I had this cable tied to me, and I'm going down through this thing with a flashlight, seeing my way.
Uh-huh.
And at the end of it is a terminal box, which is how you get your signals into the rocket. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and you come up to the terminal box and you screw that cable. It's a 61-pin connector cable that's made here on the Cape by ABMA. At those days, we didn't have contractors. We usually had civilians and military people working for the Army, basically. And I got about 3/4 of the way in, and I'm doing pretty well, I'm thinking. And all of a sudden, I see two great big yellow eyes. Now, to me, they look like saucers, but they were probably only about the size of a dime or a nickel.
Right.
And they said they'd never seen anybody get back out quicker than I did. So that's a memory that I will never forget. That was
Raccoon, rat, possum,
who knows?
armadillo.
It could have been anything.
Now you hear that story. Now you're wondering what kind of OSHA regulations he'd have to put into effect to do that same job today.
Well, I'll tell you just a little bit about that. I had a hard hat. I wish I'd kept it, because I now have the hard hat that I wore most of my time when I worked for NASA.
Well, show us that. We're talking about.
All right, this is the hard hat that I wore, and I will tell you that I told you they treated me like family. Some of you will remember Beetle Bailey, the comic strip.
Yep.
Well, I was Lieutenant Fuzz. That's because I was going to college, coming home in the summers, and I worked summers for NASA, because on the next year, 1960, the summer of 1960, I came back to work for ABMA. I'm a NASA person through no fault of my own.
Wow. I look at something like this, Dr. Koller, and friends that stay curious, and just, if this helmet could talk, if this hard hat could talk, the things it's seen, were you a coffee drinker? The number of cups of coffee and all that sort of stuff going on in there. And this is what our museum's all about, folks. Dr. Koller was Lieutenant Fuzz, and we all, Beetle Bailey. They still have Beetle Bailey? I think it's still out there. So
I remember reading it.
in there, and but
Well, it's been a long time, but they treated me like family, and so I acted like family, and it was a real team effort. That's that sustainability thing I told you about.
Right.
So now you know a little bit about size, and we'll talk about speed in a minute, because we're very quickly going to move from rockets like this with a 200-mile range to rockets that are much bigger and much faster and go much further. Now, that's Alan Shepard.
Very famous picture.
Behind him is
He's
the
on,
Mercury spacecraft, the first American into space was Alan Shepard, but he did not go into orbit. Remember, the Redstone was a ballistic missile, surface to surface. So it went up and it came down. And for a little while, Alan Shepard was in space, not a lot different than what
The Blue Origin.
the Blue Origin guys are doing, where
Shatner
they spend a little more time in space than he did. But at that time, we, as a collective science group, knew almost nothing about the physics of what would happen, could happen, and whether humans could even survive those kinds of G-forces and what happens when you're in microgravity. Didn't know whether you could swallow, didn't know if you could breathe properly.
Blink your eyes, make tears.
And as you probably know, we flew chimpanzees, and they had two of them, and then they had little buttons they could push, and if they pushed the right sequence of buttons, they got little banana pellets as rewards, and if they pushed the wrong buttons, they got an electric shock.
On their feet, yeah.
And so what that whole thing was for is to see whether brains worked. I mean, we didn't know anything.
Well,
So it's trailblazing from the very most basic ones. What's next on the list?
That's right.
Lessons learned. Now, this is a picture, an aerial view of the Cape in the early days, and you can see the port would be down at the bottom of this picture, and the runway up on the upper left-hand part.
That'd be Port Canaveral down there.
And that's right. And all of those, and there's a next picture should show the launch pads all down along the true Cape, and you can see the Atlantic Ocean there out to your right here on this picture. So you're looking at pads that would have started with something like Atlas and ended up at the other end with Titans, and then way on down, you can't really see it, would have been the Saturn 1B pad 34 and pad 37.
You're looking down from pad 36, the famous lighthouse is to the left of this picture, right? It looks like.
Correct.
And
That's correct.
as we're looking at this, Dr. Koller, Marty Winkle, my co-producer, and went out there with Bart Martindale, who co-hosts and is a docent out there at Cape Canaveral. And we hope to be bringing you some shows from out there, the remnants of those pads in the near future. So it'll be exciting to see what's looked at.
But keep in mind, look at the size. It's no longer 400 feet.
Right.
We don't have blockhouses that were like the old ones. They don't have windows. They have periscopes, the ones on this end, believe it or not. And then eventually we get television cameras, if you can imagine that.
Wow.
Wow,
Actually
we're
could
really
see it on
moving
a
along.
TV
So
Vidicon.
now, but we're looking at maybe 5 years difference from where we looked at pads 26 and 5 and 6 to this whole thing growing up. And you were right. It was driven by the Cold War and the fear that the Russians were way ahead of us. In many ways, they were. They obviously launched the first satellite successfully, and they launched the first man in space successfully, Yuri Gagarin. They beat us only by about a month on that one, but and then of course Shepard went up, and then it took about another year before we got John Glenn into orbit as the first American in orbit. So we were behind, and it took some real effort to get us to caught up.
What was the pressure you felt from behind, if any? Now, Marty's told us about working for Grumman, the lunar module. They were completely engrossed in that, 12-hour shifts, didn't know much about what was going on in the Vietnam War, the Civil Rights Movement, what popular songs were
That's all true.
on the chart. And same way with you?
This was all self-contained. Didn't have a NASA causeway, so you came in the North Road, if you will, basically.
Okay.
And you drove then down the south end here to get to the port, or basically this is the Cape. And so you were marooned. Marooned. You didn't go off base for lunch.
Yeah, you could. There wasn't a place to go off with it.
Wasn't any way. So they
Yeah.
had chow trucks that would come around to the pad. And
Chow trucks.
chow trucks.
Today we call them food trucks.
They were the first food trucks.
Yeah.
That's-
Marty
well, that's
says
what
roach
That's
goats,
right.
yeah.
That's what we called them. Yep. And they were
Low Main Charlie.
they were manned by
Okay.
women who were very well known by the people. And by the way, this was all men. There were no women in this very early day thing, because mostly, as you said, Cold War, military, mostly out of the military. Even the civilian workers had military backgrounds, basically. So
The
it was
military is where the financial support was too.
Yes.
I mean, there wasn't a public space program yet.
and it was, and you
NASA.
didn't talk about it. When
Yeah.
you left the base, you went home and left it all at the base. You didn't carry tales back home.
Huh.
Which, by the way, put a tremendous stress on the families.
Yeah, it's make
In
it
that
difficult
time frame.
around the dinner table with
Yes.
your wife and family,
Hey,
and
how was work today?
what.
What
yeah.
did you do? You can't tell you. But if you happen to be out tomorrow about 7:00, look to the east. And
Yeah.
You may or may not.
Well, being in Tennessee, Knoxville area and Oak Ridge, there, I know people my age who say their moms and dads both worked there, and neither one knew what they did.
yeah,
They couldn't talk about it. They didn't know what they did.
you were badged.
and,
Without a badge, you didn't get anywhere. And I don't think I told the story like I meant to earlier. I told you about the early days. I got a hard hat when I first came aboard.
Uh-huh.
Now I'm in the ground electrical. The hard hat is a wide-brimmed aluminum hard hat.
Oh, okay.
Think about that. And I wish I had it. Mine happened to be painted red. Who knows why? Go ahead to the next.
Did you? Let's go to the next one here.
Now,
Make that big.
just this will give you some idea. This would have been about 1959. These are all the different companies that were involved in 59, 60, 61, 62, and the hangars in which they operated from.
Convair, Lockheed, Martin, Northrop Fairchild, North American, ABMA. Well, that was your.
It was an absolutely frantic time,
And I'm looking at
Rocket done.
Convair Astronautics, Rocketdyne. Got a little mention
Braun.
there.
Yep.
Convair became General
and
Dynamics.
they aren't all mentioned there, but those are the ones that had hangars, and those are the hangar letters.
Aerojet.
And one of the things
A
that
building directory on a billboard there. Look at that cool rocket
Isn't
up
that
there.
pretty
What
neat?
the? I don't recognize that model rocket
Oh,
with those
shoot.
fins on there. That's not a bow mark, I know.
No, it's not. If I had my book,
An arrow,
I'd
yeah.
probably find it.
Yeah, there. Well, we won't put you on the spot there.
Sorry.
Let's go back here to. So
I
there
did-
we've
but I
got.
didn't work on that one anyway.
Oh, okay.
Okay, now
Well, there's the beast.
there
There's
we
Werner
go.
von Braun. And by the way, Dr. Koller, yesterday was the 57th anniversary of the launch of Apollo 4, the first all-up test of this mighty machine.
Saturn V.
That was 13 for 13 on launches. All right. And you're going to tell us a little about it here.
I am. First thing I'll say is, again, look at the bottom. It's sitting on a mobile launch platform that's basically 2 stories high. That metal
Wow.
thing that's underneath the gray is like a submarine with pressure doors, and because it's going to see a tremendous environment of pressure and heat during the liftoff.
Yeah, that's just not a block of metal this
No.
thing's standing on. There's all kinds of. I learned this
Well, there's
about
a
the
big
shuttle.
hole in the
about the
center
shuttle ones, yeah.
for the exhaust. It's
Right,
sitting on
but
top
there's
of that thing.
rooms and chambers and all kinds of things in there to release the
That's
pressure.
right.
So this thing don't blow apart, right?
No.
Uh-huh.
Now, on the left-hand side of that rocket is from my perspective, and I'm not sure what they're seeing, whether it's the
Yeah,
right or
there's
left.
the way we are there.
That's the mobile launch tower. I'm sorry, the launch umbilical tower with 7 swing arms that carry fluids and electrical signals and so on to the rockets at all the stages. And then on the other side is a piece that's kind of gone away. That's a mobile service structure, and it ran essentially on a set of rails, or basically the crawler transporter, I guess, lifted it and it had to be carried away. That's all gone away now. We have some structures at the pad, but they made pads cleaner and it's easier to deal with. And just imagine the work that went into the civil engineering for that thing, and then the maintenance of all of that.
Yeah, that's a big part of the space program that you might not think about. Is the structures had as much engineering and genius problems solved as did the rockets themselves, right?
Absolutely. And if you look at that, that's a Saturn V with an escape tower on it. I think it's probably about 363 feet from the bottom to the top.
Mm-hmm.
And the tower is even higher than that. So we're talking a very huge
Over 400
structures.
feet.
Yeah.
up there.
It's as far up that tower as it is to get from the blockhouse at 26 to the launch pad for the Redstone.
Oh, wow. Jeez.
Give you some idea.
Also
now,
give you
we're
some...
3 miles. We are 3 miles away from the Launch Control Center here.
Wow.
We're at
And,
pad 39A. We're 3 miles away, not 400 feet.
Right.
3 miles.
Three repercussions of the aerodynamics of the air
It was a blast protection area.
Okay.
If it were to blow up, the
Right.
TNT equivalency,
Oh, that's they say you'd be safe 3 miles
you
away.
had to be 3 miles away.
Right.
And
Well, we were talking about Apollo 4 being launched all these years ago. No one knew what to expect. Very famously, CBS newscaster Walter Cronkite is reporting it, and as it's lifting off, he's going like, "The building's shaking," and he stands up to hold the window from falling
Well,
in
and
on him.
part of the
Stuff like
ceiling
that.
did.
Part of the ceiling came down. I mean, so you didn't even know what to expect when you launched the thing. The noise, the everything. And it
well,
really-
and that was part of why people ask, why was so much land taken by NASA?
Mhm.
And
No.
that's because you needed to have, first of all, two things: the security zone, because it was, and it was prior to NASA, obviously, it was the Eastern Test Range, and we were in a Cold War, and so you had to be far enough away that they couldn't spy on you easily, and they did that, by the way, from the ocean as well as from the land side.
Oh yeah, a lot of submarine
But
periscopes
also,
looking at you.
in the early days, a lot of the tests failed in catastrophic ways, explosions, and so you had to worry about overpressures and shrapnel and all the other things that go along with what happens when it doesn't go nominally. Yeah, and that's why the Cape is as big as it is.
But we're enjoying a conversation here with Dr. Al Koller, who spent 32 years with NASA, and then he spent a decade or so as a Brevard Community College president at the Titusville branch, and then he founded a space tech company that certifies aviation and space workers. And this is all made possible. We're so grateful to the Marie Louise G West Endowment that gave us money to do these conversations with people like you. And hope you're enjoying it. Do we have any comments or questions from anybody? Just hope they're enjoying a wonderful conversation on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. And let's carry on here. Go on to the next. There.
That's the Launch
about
Control
the,
Center. Yeah, there were size. Remember size? Launch Control Center. Those are all windows you're looking at.
Right
And now
beside the
we're-
big vehicle assembly building.
and,
It's still
and-
there,
and
of
we're-
course.
you can see, if you count them, 4 firing rooms.
Mm-hmm.
Complex 26 and Complex 5 and 6, which we always called 56, but it wasn't. It was 5 and 6. 26 and 56 had 2 firing rooms each.
Okay.
And 26 had A and B.
Those
and
were
56
unmanned
had 5 and 6. Those were-
launches there.
no, that's also where Shepard went from.
Oh,
So
okay.
you did have manned. He went from 5.
Okay,
Had
5. Yeah, all right.
But
5.
anyway, so we're now 3 miles away, and we'll get a peek at inside, and we'll see what the crews look like. Remember the crew shots we had? This is the crew shot. This picture, by the way, is hanging in the Smithsonian.
Yeah.
This is Apollo 11, and the crew is about. And if you take everybody in that Launch Control Center, it's a 4-story building, probably 500 people, not 25 people, 500 people.
And you're circled there,
Size,
number 30. Is that
size,
you
size.
circled in
I'm
there?
number 30, yes, sir. And my
See him-
job, by the
circle
way,
him there. And to the right, Jessica, of that picture in the center, he's number 30 there in the middle.
My circle's not behaving.
Oh, okay. I wanted to point out Joanne Morgan,
Oh, yeah.
the only
Good.
woman in the room there in
Yes.
the black sweater there. And Joanne's a great friend of yours,
Yes.
and in our museum, we're so grateful for her contributions and support of our museum there. But yeah, so it went from Alan
she was
Shepard,
also a
25.
graduate of Titusville High School.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so-
When we interviewed her on Stay Curious, she said she got her job because the postmaster recommended that she look at on the bulletin board wall of job openings. Am I correct? That's the story she told us.
That's probably right.
That's Joanne Morgan there. Hi, Joanne. She's I think she's back on the Space Coast. She spends her summers in Montana. And then Koller's the blue line there. You might circle that, Jessica. if
Now,
that
keep
works
in
out.
mind, we're now 3 miles away from the launch pad. all of those television pictures, all of the gauges, all of the switches and knobs have individual wires that run all the way out there.
And Jessica, right in the center to the right, like 22. That's Deke Slayton. If you circle there, you see Al Shepard, Deke Slayton. Trying to pick out a couple of.
Manually move it.
Okay, that's all right.
But
But anyway.
But what you can't see is right above where I am, basically. There are 4 screens that were serviced by German Ida 4 projectors, color, and those screens were what von Braun, Debus, and all the basic launch leaders who are in the rows on to your right. Watched. My job was to be the NASA eyes for the launch pad, to see what was going on at the pad, if there were issues or if they needed to track whatever was going on out there. That was the only way you could do it. Didn't have any way. You're 3 miles away. You don't see anything 3 miles away.
Right.
So there were, must have been somewhere around 60 or 61 cameras all up and down that tower that we're looking at. And that's how we could keep track of what was going on.
And when we're talking cameras in 1969, we're talking some low resolution, black and white. The type stuff there.
But they all did pan and zoom, so you had some sophistication.
And there's another 2,000 people you don't see that are involved with this launch.
Yes.
Behind the scenes.
So it's it's huge. And now, so I said size and speed. Now
there we go.
That's the old one.
That's the old one.
Had 26 or 56.
1961.
Yep. And now in 1969, here we are. What, 8 years later?
Yep.
500 people in the firing room are in related right close by, and
exponentially multiplied.
Unbelievable, unbelievable, and hundreds of launches a year. We started with winged vehicles, believe it or not.
Yes.
Their job was to intercept. If there was
the Beaumark, the Navajo, and other ones like that.
And so the only vehicles that were made specifically for science and exploration of space were those vehicles on Apollo. And for the Gemini and the Mercury, they actually used weapon systems that were man-rated. And we went from essentially taking weapons of war and made them into weapons of peace. And I guess when I see this picture with Apollo 11, I get goosebumps because I remember the plaque that was put on the moon that said, "We come in peace for all mankind." And that's what America is all about. Still is and was then. And how it felt to be something that was so big. You were a part of everybody who worked there. I don't care what you did, whether you were the janitor or whether you did whatever.
Marty was there. Marty's lunar modules on top of that rocket, the LM-5.
You were a part of something.
Grumman's, not Marty's. He's going to correct me. Yeah. Yeah. You know what I'm saying. They're sorry to interrupt you.
So, when you were stuck there for 7 days with no time off and 12-hour days, you did it. And nobody complained. And you knew that it was something where you made a contribution personally.
The man's greatest adventure. Now, politics aside, how much of a factor was President Kennedy's murder involved in this, that you wanted to do it because he said we were going to do it? And we not only did it in July, we doubled down in November with Apollo 12.
Yep. Well, it was a big part of it, obviously. They renamed the Cape for a little while, Cape Kennedy.
That's pretty big.
And then they took that back away because all of the nautical charts showed Canaveral. So it went back to Canaveral, but it was, for a little while, it was...
Yeah, 9 years, till 72.
So it's just an interesting
I know it wasn't
time.
like win one for the Gipper type of thing.
Yeah.
But it had to be in the back of everybody's minds that that we the integrity of President Kennedy was on the line. I mean,
well, and I don't want to get into politics.
Yeah, right.
That'll get me in trouble. But I will say this: from my standpoint, remember I started out as a 17-year-old kid, And now I'm about 26 years old, 27 years old. We're
Now you know everything.
we've gone
Now.
to the moon. No, I don't know everything, but I know this.
Well, I did
that
at 26.
one
I
of
don't
the-
know about you.
One of the things that might have happened if Kennedy hadn't been assassinated, we may have used the last 3 fully qualified flight units to go back to the moon. We stopped at 17, 18, 19, and 20 went into museums.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's almost criminal.
Yeah. Well,
Sorry, but
that's politics with the shuttle too.
but you see,
is,
once you land on the moon and you've now done,
Hey, we did it.
by then you've got rovers.
now let's explore.
And you've gathered up your whatever you're going to bring back home, the rocks and so on. And so some of the political thinking is we can only hurt ourselves. We could kill somebody. So we lost the will to go back with those 3 units. We didn't do it. And at the same time, we're looking now at Shuttle, and that's the transition piece. And you have a picture of that. We salvaged a lot of the equipment off of Apollo. That's the same mobile launch platform, modified, because now instead of a big hole in the center for the engines, we have not only the engines from Shuttle, but also the solid rocket boosters. So it's shaped very differently. Another whole engineering modification system, if you can
plus
imagine.
the hydraulic system, the sound
And the hold
suppression
down
systems,
arms,
and
it's all very, very different. And one of the things that happens here now is where we flew in Apollo with capsules on the tip of the rocket.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're flying a crew a number of tens of feet lower, closer to the blast-off area.
Mm-hmm.
And because now we have a big flat surface, it reflects the pressure and the noise back up into the vehicle. And so we have a water system that dampens the sound. And the engineering changed completely. And this was a true rocket airplane.
There we go.
Yep.
The STS-1. We celebrated 40 years ago in April. The brave John Crippen and John Young and Bob Crippen.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, we've lost John Young a little while ago, Orlando native son, Bob Crippen. Bob's probably 86, I think. Very. You ever interact with either of those gentlemen?
Not directly. Not directly, but one of the things that happened between Apollo and from my personal standpoint, are we doing okay on time?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
One of the things
Much
that
time as
happened
you
from my
want.
personal standpoint was we changed from, how do I want to say this? Well, I already have said it, from essentially a manned system where we didn't fly very often to a manned system where we were going to fly 40 flights a year. That was the traffic model that sold the shuttle.
Yeah.
And so as a result of that, I don't know how, I've been the luckiest guy in the world. I've gotten jobs that I just never imagined I would have. Basically, I was an electrical technician. Then I became a systems engineer. Then I became a staff guy for Dr. Gruner, who was the number 2 man on the launch vehicle operations. And then I got assigned to design engineering and put in charge of the group that helped write
The environmental
impact
of the whole
statement, because
Space Center.
we didn't even think about environment when we were working the Cold War stuff.
That worm logo.
Yeah, it is the worm logo.
And by the way, this was one of the first major printed jobs at NASA, from my perspective, that it was full color. And the reason it was full color was we had vegetation maps that you couldn't do in black. There was just no way to. You had to have color.
You could do patterns
to
but
make
it
any-
wasn't nearly as
No,
accurate.
no.
Yeah, you've got a little
Yes.
Cape
pamphlet or two,
Cape Canaveral.
Well, it's the vegetation map, and we had we had a lot of outreach, including people from the University of Central Florida.
Okay. 180. There you go. Not even picking up green.
Oh,
Not
wow.
even invisible today.
That's old school green on there.
Yeah.
The green screen doesn't.
So,
Vintage.
Well, what a
well, that paved the way for me. I ended up at the biomedical office, not the launch vehicle operations guy anymore. I'm now in the biomedical office, and here I am. You could, in my opinion, you could take what I knew about biology, and you wouldn't be able to make a good shotgun shell out of what you could make. But I got the job of doing that, and I became the biomedical program manager for Kennedy, and worked on things that finally turned into the space lab stuff that now has its own building out at Exploration Park.
Oh, wow.
And we had had all kinds of really interesting scientists who stayed involved, and now we're no longer driven by the Cold War. We've won the Cold War. So now it's on us to say, what is it we want to do? What are we able to do? What can we pay for? And what's next in the game? So you have this reusable vehicle, and as you pointed out earlier, basically three sections, right?
We talked about
Go ahead.
at our pre-production meeting about the 30-year legacy of the shuttle is it was going to be the space truck like 51A we celebrated yesterday. It's taking up 2 satellites, doing 2 spacewalks to bring
them back.
that didn't work right. That were stranded, and fixed them and took them up again. 25 missions into that, Challenger happened, and we weren't even close to doing 6 or 7. I think 8 is the most
you're right,
launches they
about
ever
8.
did in a year.
Yes.
But they were lucky to do one every other month. We lost the crew of Challenger. That changed the space truck. All the companies that signed up for it moved to the single stick rockets again that we still use. Then the middle section, I was telling Dr. Koller, is the life science stuff that you were involved with there, that learning in the space lab and in the mid-deck with experiments and stuff, how to do things we're doing now for the last 20 years on the International Space Station. Then the last third of the shuttle era, of course, is construction of the
and servicing of the space station.
for service in the space station. You got to say the most miraculous thing ever built by humans. You can put your buildings on Earth and so forth in there, but this thing's in outer space, folks.
Yes.
Orbiting the Earth, and it's been there 21 years, continuously occupied.
And at one point, I knew there were at least 16 countries involved.
Yep.
So we did the international outreach, and keep in mind that plaque that said, "We come in peace for all mankind." It's still a thread that runs through our space program.
But your size, your speed, and now
Yes.
your sustainability of sustaining humans in space for 21 consecutive years is a legacy that we're just starting, to get a grip on. That 200 years from now, who knows how they'll look back on.
Can we do a little controversial stuff?
Sure.
Heck yeah.
Well, let me just pick a little bit. Space Force. Major change in how we see where space is headed. The Chinese, I think, sort of pushed us there because they used target practice on satellites.
Yes, they have. They
And
put
made it
shrapnel up
and
there
so
and
now
wiped out their own.
we have this move to weaponize space, and I have a suggestion that I've made on several occasions, and I'll make it again here. We have in this country, and have had for more than 200 years, a group called the Coast Guard. Think about what they do. They go out every day to essentially save people from themselves who get in trouble out on the seas and aren't able to help themselves. We're about to get into a similar situation where we're going to have people on orbit who get in trouble, and they won't have a way to get themselves helped back. If the Space Force could also become the Space Guard, they could do a whole series of things, including all the things that the interdiction is one of the things that the Coast Guard does. You know, they keep drugs from coming in from offshore.
Mm-hmm.
They carry weapons. They do law enforcement. Those are the kinds of things that the Space Force is already aimed at doing, but not search and rescue, which is probably one of the most important areas where the Coast Guard does. You know, parajumpers who jump into the ocean and save people from drowning. And here we are now in a situation where you have a group of people on orbit, and the system malfunctions, and they're going to be up there until somebody figures out how to go and bring them back home. I think there's a lot of room for some very positive expansion, building on what's already a powerful Space Force, and do more of what the Coast Guard does for us in our seas.
think of that insight, stay curious watchers there, that yes, we are going to have trouble in space. That's human nature. Someone's going to have a heart attack. Someone's going to have a stroke. Somebody's going
Like
to,
movie.
really have an accident. What are we going to do? And they have prepared for these emergencies within the confines of the thin walls of the ISS, but there's no rescue ambulance ready to go out there like somebody's lost at sea out there.
Well, that's right.
I mean, we live here on Florida coast. Every year there's some doctor, lawyer, sportsman, somebody's out there fishing that doesn't come back because something happened.
Well, and the Coast Guard says, their motto is Semper Paratus, always ready. We need something like that for the space piece. And that's all I'll say about
That's
that
good.
one. I
That's
think
good.
it's
That's
a
good. Do you
marvelous
think that
opportunity
should come
laying out
from
there.
our government or a private company?
It
being
can be
involved?
both, but it needs to be government driven at this point in time,
Mm-hmm.
in my opinion. Okay,
Well, we're going to look at
see what else we got.
well, we've got the shuttle firing room there, and that's Marty in the upper right-hand corner back there. He's way back there. He's on the launch process service.
But
team
now
there.
what you're doing, you've shifted now to situations where you have IT involved. You have fiber optics, you have Wi-Fi, you have things we didn't have when we had to use wires and tubes
And caves.
to convey the
Caves,
information.
yeah, and
With
put
your helmet on.
putting a belt around you and sending you in a cage.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, you said tubes. People don't even know what you're talking about. Vacuum tubes. that
No,
were
I
in-
was thinking about pipes.
Oh, pipes. Okay,
Yeah,
I
'cause
was
you're
thinking
looking
how
at
going from
yeah,
vacuum tubes to
you-
transistors. Okay, pipes.
Yes,
yeah.
both. You're right.
Yeah.
So
in there. They thought there were vacuum tube satellites before transistors and
So
stuff.
now what happens is the next step, and we're seeing it already, probably one of the most positive steps was the incorporation big time of the commercial space people who have now taken over pieces where they operate independently, essentially. They're on the government reservation. They have to follow the rules and regulations, but once you go through their gates, they're in charge, okay? They do their own badging. They do their own selection of people. They're responsible for what goes on there. And what we've done is sort of put a force multiplier on that's that sustainability part that I was talking about. So we know about speed, we know about size. Now the sustainability part becomes the real focus. How do we do that? And how do we begin to make it pay? And the answer is you start with paying customers, just like we did in the aircraft industry when we went from flying the mail, which was paid for by the government, to flying people, which we now do every day without even thinking twice about it. Until
Thousands of people.
without COVID, we didn't. Now we
Right,
think twice
yeah,
about it, but
yeah.
we didn't. Yeah, every day.
I'm one of the stats I love seeing in the morning shows is that one of the stations used to throw up a chart of all the airplanes that were in the air at like 7 in the morning.
Yes.
And there's like, 2,000 flights in the air right now with 300 people on them going to their, like taxis to
Yep.
their business
And not even
appointments.
thinking twice about
No.
it. And we're not there yet, but we're beginning to be there. So the first paying customers have already gotten into the game. Too much for me. I don't know about you. You make a lot more money than I do.
Well, I'm saying Marty,
So the next step will be
I want to go with Marty so he can look out after
ramping
me,
up the
throw
numbers
out.
of people and ramping down the cost of getting to space, and that's underway. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
I'll never forget how I felt when I watched the first SpaceX booster stage come back and land on land, and I thought I'd seen it all. And then the next thing that happened was they landed on a barge at sea.
Yes.
Pitching
That's
and-
moving.
Oh man! So now we know the power of artificial intelligence, robotic systems, computer systems, and the sky's no longer the limit. Somebody said, and that's absolutely
Yeah.
right.
By the way,
The problem is we have right now too many options, in my opinion. One of the problems that NASA's always had is too many options, and I know enough to say the way to inspire a team to make things happen, and we had all kinds of teams in Apollo, and that has grown. It's gotten more complicated now because the teams are mixed teams. They're government and contractor employees, and and unless they have badges on them, you can't tell one from the other. Okay, and that's how it ought to be. The team needs to be without boundaries. But I guess I'm wondering, what if you were to choose a single goal for the space program? Not 25, because that's what we have between the science guys, the ones who are going to go to Mars, the ones who are going to go back to the moon, the ones who want to build a new space station. We're competing with ourselves, and we always have. NASA's always had that problem where we compete amongst ourselves.
Oh.
We need to pick one goal, and if you asked me which one I would pick, it would have been one we should have picked 50 years ago. Colonize the moon. Go to the moon and colonize. It's 3 days away. It makes sense. Mars is 3 months away.
9 months.
And well, we're going to cut that down because we're going to use propulsion systems.
Oh, good.
Remember the moon
Good.
was 9 months away.
We're gonna go speed.
Yes, but the fact is, we need a uniting goal, and I hope that our political people, our leaders, can come together and find a way to choose a goal like colonizing the moon and not give up any of the rest. Just make that the compelling goal, the one. That's what Kennedy did when he picked. And by the way, I was always kind of a weenie guy. Here I am. I'm a youngest guy on the launch team.
Lieutenant
I'm
Fuzz.
way down the organization, and I'm watching people struggle, and they were all concerned about how we get to the moon in that 10-year period. When Kennedy said that, they had just done basically Shepard.
Yeah, right. 15 minutes of
Nobody had
suborbital
any
flight.
idea how we could do that. And somehow put our minds together, work toward a single goal, and darn if we didn't make it ahead of time.
Well, Kennedy said in his speech, we don't know what we're going to need. We're going to invent it along the way, and it's going to make our country great
And it did.
and make us leaders, and it changed the whole world and communication and everything like that. We're enjoying a great conversation with Dr. Al Koller here. These oral histories like this made possible by the Marie Louise G. West Endowment Fund that's really helped our museum out to bring great programs like this, a conversation with a man who lived here in the delivery room of America's space age for 60 years. There's got to be some pride in that, to know that you had a little piece of the pie in there, Dr. Koller. And, as far as sustainability, this gentleman has sustained his presence in our community with always thinking into the future, like we were talking about the Coast Guard type of rescue missions to space. And we wanted to talk a little about your company here, Space Tech. Share with us a little bit about how that, before this, you were the president of the Titusville campus of the Brevard Community College.
I was.
And so segue into that and what you're doing in Space Tech.
All right. I retired in when was it? I don't even know anymore. 1992, I guess, from NASA after 32 years, biomedical program manager. And I was out, and my wife thought, I was 52 years old. My wife thought, how's he going to stay out?
Going to be around the
trouble?
house all day
There
long?
you go.
Nope.
3 days later, I got a job with Brevard Community College, and I was hired on as a consultant, and I helped them do some strategic planning because that's where my doctorate led me. Really like what you do, Al, but we're paying you too much. You got to come to work for me full time. And I said, okay, what'll I be? And he said, you'll be special assistant to the president. I said, that sounds great. But I was doing some workshops for the Air Force in total quality management, if you remember those days.
Yeah.
And I had to complete that. And so while I was gone, one of the guys, his vice president for international education, retired. And when I went to go to work at BCC, they made me the vice president of international education. Now, Mark, you could take what I knew about that, and fill a thimble.
Okay.
But I learned fast. And the neat part about that was it was tied to an organization called the Community Colleges for International Development, CCID. Still exists. Right now it's based in Texas. At that time it was based in Florida, in Cocoa, at Brevard Community College. And I got eventually to be the executive director of that. And the neat thing about it was international education where we did faculty and student exchanges with foreign countries, mostly developing countries. So we would go into a developing country and help them learn how to do manufacturing, somehow take care of maybe promoting the females who didn't get good educational opportunities. Now they did. And there was a college involved in CCID in the location of each NASA center. I was really happy doing my thing at Brevard Community College, Titusville campus, and I thought I'd retire from there.
Mm-hmm.
The college got a grant for $1 million from the state of Florida called the Horizon Grant. It was to train aerospace technicians. And Tom Gamble was the president then, and he came and fingered me and said, "You got to go back to work at the Cape." And I said, "I don't want to go back to work at the Cape. I was making a lot more money. If I wanted to be there, He said, "No, you got to do it." So I did it. And the first thing I found out was that we knew a lot more than we thought we knew, but we didn't know the right things. And so we started looking at the curriculum and pulling together groups of people who were essentially representatives from the contractors. At one point in time, and I wrote a little orientation book in the early days for NASA, there were 27 different contractors working for NASA at the Kennedy Space Center. 27 different ones. There was a reproduction contractor, there was a mail contractor, there was a contractor who ran the library. See where I'm coming from?
Yeah.
All those little different jobs were, now they've compiled those back together, and now there's 2 or 3 big contracts. But in those days, they were like 3 years long. And so there was a huge turnover. And when that happened, especially in the launch areas or even the ground support areas, that network of colleges that was really designed for international work but turned out to be national work, and we filed for a National Science Foundation grant and won a National Science Foundation Center of Excellence
Wow.
for
Big deal.
aerospace technical training, and put in place 100 trained, what do I want to say, examiners, 100 trained examiners, and a 4-hour hands-on performance-based test to certify aerospace technicians at the same level that the FAA was certifying aviation mechanics.
Okay.
And it sold. And over about a 10-year period, we got $15 million from the National Science Foundation to run Space Tech. It still exists today.
That's right.
It's no longer funded by NSF, but it gets its own funding from contracts.
Our friend Steve Kane.
Steve Kane, who was
Thank
here
you.
last week, I think.
Yes, a couple weeks ago we did Stay Curious with Steve Kane.
And he's done very well. One of the things that really was a door opener for us, we got tied in with the military, and they all have online programs for training their technicians. And they all wanted third-party, hands-on certifications, and we had the capability to do that. So we opened contracts initially with the Army, but the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, all have cooperative online programs that pay for the Space Tech examination. It was really groundbreaking. It was never done like that before. They would pay for the training, but they wouldn't pay for the certs.
Wow.
And, when you're running a program with 100 examination sites around the country and a 4-hour test with kits that carry all the equipment and so on, it's expensive to do that. So it took some real funding to keep it going. And I give Steve credit. He's now tied it in with the ASTM, so they have a worldwide.
Yes,
really-
it's quite an operation. Testing so important.
Looking at
keeping the
apprenticeships.
skills up. These apprenticeships that are growing from this, just an amazing thing there.
So if you asked me earlier what my major's biggest contribution was, it might have been that.
There you
Yeah.
go.
I
There
was
you are,
off-
to Brevard Community College 10-gallon hat.
Yeah, that's what that was a hard hat, by the way. It was qualified.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I didn't mean to skirt that. You say your biggest contribution might be Space Tech, so putting everything all together.
It probably was Space Tech because it bridged the gap between industry and government and education. It put those 3 elements together in an area where none of them had a dog in the fight. They were all positive. And we did, oh, by the way, go back to that one for a minute. I've been asked a number of times by people who knew that we had a Titan in front of the Titusville High School for a number of years.
Right.
And it really fell into disrepair. The Kiwanis had accepted some money to refurbish it. And when we took it in to have it refurbished, the price was like $50,000, which was way beyond anything we could imagine because it had gotten corroded over time. So we took it over and moved it over to the Cape and stripped out the engines and used them as training aids. And that old Titan became a major contributor to the hands-on work that we did.
Had a
for
renaissance
aerospace
there.
technicians. Yes, and the Kiwanis were kind enough to donate their monies to scholarships for students in that program.
Okay.
So it was a win-win for everybody.
That's what's going on here.
If anybody wanted to know how it disappeared, it did disappear, but it didn't go away. Can I say it that way?
There you go.
It's on the Cape. And sort of a sad part to that story to share. We were really doing well. We were bringing students onto the Cape and putting them elbow to elbow with engineers and technicians who were in the business.
Mm-hmm.
And we actually had our own launch pad, pad 47, which was the weather rocket pad. We had that, maintained it, and could teach from it. And then came 9/11.
Oh, wow.
And the gates all closed.
Yeah. Dang.
And I don't think there's a college in the country that doesn't have some foreign students. And
Right.
Of course, couldn't bring them in.
Yeah.
We ended up with a bus and worked for a while to bring students in, clear them, and bring them to class. But it really was very difficult to do. And so that piece of it sort of fell by the wayside.
Well, we're ending up our conversation here with a wonderful guy, Dr. Al Koller, who has supported this museum for a long time with his spirit and financially and finding us good relics to put in here. What else we got to look at? There's your book. All right, there's the book that we talked about earlier that you've done, that he's made available to everybody. We want to show this other.
Well, I have one
before
artifact.
we go out.
that
Yeah,
we
there's
can do.
the Al Koller.
I'll show that one back. That's a good one. That shows you how you can get a free copy of the book,
Yep.
and it's in digital form. And I
There it
encourage
is.
you to do it for a couple of reasons. And I love the print, but I like the digital better, and I'll tell you why. 2 reasons. First of all, the pictures in the book are old, and so they don't show up as well in print as they do on the digital. You'll get better depth of vision and everything by the digital. If you get the digital copy of the book, the pictures are better. But the other thing is, in the back of that book are secrets of aerospace activities. Why we launch in windows, why we launch from the east, why we launch from the north, it's by satellites versus communication satellites and that sort of thing. And there's a whole page of links, hot links, to all the different space additional information.
And on the digital.
There's that page there.
They're all
yeah.
live on the digital. You can't
That's
do
all right.
that in the book,
Yeah.
okay?
Oh,
You
there
just
you
can't
go.
do that
Thanks,
in the book.
Marty.
I mean, they're blue, but you can't
Yeah.
click on them.
That's right. Well, you can click on them, but they won't do anything.
Cool little pamphlet there. It absolutely is.
Anyway, so I have one
Yeah,
artifact.
we want to end here. Let me set that up a little bit
Okay.
here. That one, I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation here with Dr. Koller. We are here in the delivery room of America's Space Age, and here's he was one of the nurses. He wasn't one of the doctors maybe there, but you were one of the nurses' aides there in that delivery room to do the fabulous things that the whole world was envious of for so long. And of course, we probably wouldn't have done it without the Operation Paperclip and our fortune of getting Dr. Werner von Braun. And you worked with Dr. von Braun, and he's got a really cool piece of memorabilia here from von Braun. But those of you who don't know, Dr. von Braun was the German rocket engineer, and that after World War II, he took his secrets here to America with his top 100 and some other rocket scientists. He was a tall man, but he had this squeaky, high-pitched voice, right? And I know you were around him a few times, but you say you didn't interact a lot. But tell us a von Braun story and about what you have there to share.
I will do that. I will tell you that Dr. von Braun was an amazing person. In even the early days, he saw and made plans for how to get to Mars and never gave up on that.
By 1985, by the way.
And caught up, by the way, in the World War II, the German problems. His team was at Pinamunda.
Mount Pinamunda.
And they were brought over here, and eventually and did work at where White Sand,
Yeah, White Sands.
and then eventually
first,
ended
then
up here.
Redstone Arsenal
And
Group.
so Bumper was a V2 rocket,
Uh-huh.
and the Redstone is a derivation of the V2 rocket. People don't know it, but the Redstone was fueled with alcohol. I told you that. What I didn't tell you was it was fueled with ethyl alcohol.
Uh-huh.
You can drink ethyl alcohol.
Oh, okay.
I won't say any more about that.
All right. As in vodka.
But anyway,
Rocket Vodka, the new brand brought to you by Dr. Koller Company.
in the early days,
I
we
can
didn't.
get behind
Yeah.
that.
In just to show you a difference in I don't guess it's size, it's sustainability. In the early days, we did not have procedures. We had checklists. In fact, one of the saddest things I ever saw was when we got. My father was a quality engineer, and when the quality engineering people came aboard, we had ABMA old technicians who cried tears because what they said was, "You don't trust us." Think about that. Now we have a second set of eyes, and they had always been relied on to do their best, which they did. Anyway, I got to know von Braun a little bit, not very much, but I was never in a meeting where he didn't capture the entire room. He could walk into the room, and it was like a magnet. And this is the procedure, the first one that ever carried a color cover, I think, from AS-104, SA-8 at Complex 37, was launching Pegasus satellite.
Okay.
Mark, do you want to hold it up so
Yeah.
he can talk?
Yeah,
to the mic?
yeah. There's the.
And if you look real careful at the top, there's a signature there. It says Werner von Braun. It's the only time I ever ask anybody for an autograph. He was on his way to a management meeting at Complex 37 in the blockhouse,
I'm gonna get that.
and he
letter out.
carried it and went up the steps, and that's the last I saw of him because this was during the countdown, okay, or prior to, and it just disappeared. And I thought, well, okay, no big deal. And after about 6 weeks, I get it back with a letter.
And there's a letter here that I'll read. Dear Al, this countdown manual inadvertently ended up in Dr. von Braun's briefcase. He didn't discover it until after we had left the Cape, and he was quite concerned about it. He asked me to personally see to it that it was returned to you. I'm sorry to have waited this long to send the manual, but I fully expect that we will be back down for the GT4 launch, and I would return it personally. Since we didn't make it, I decided to give it to you in the mail. Howard Camp, one of his associates, in a June 8th, 1965 letter on yellow note paper there. Von Braun was concerned that he had swiped your manual.
Can you imagine a man as busy as he had to be who cared enough to get that back
Make
to
sure
a
it got back to you.
little old guy like me?
Yeah.
It's a marvelous piece of history.
I have seen and heard of von Braun's management skills. They were unbelievable. His top lieutenants every day gave him a one-sheet bullet report of what was going on. He read every one of them, and the next morning they had his reply in bullets from maybe 10 different department heads, sending to him at the end of the day on a sheet of paper what they did, and he would be sent and stay that night and send out the memo of what I want you to do tomorrow about it. Am I correct?
Yes, I've
seen.
Sustainability says we need leaders like that. Another good one that comes to mind is Rocco Petrone. We're going to hear more about him. Probably going to get the Launch Control Center named after Rocco Petrone.
Oh, good. He was
that's
the
in
Apollo
work.
launch director that controlled the whole pad. Very.
We're gradually getting to the point where we acknowledge the leadership that was there and the importance of that teamwork. I guess if I could leave you with one thought, it is that whatever else space is about, it's about teamwork. It doesn't happen with a single individual. It takes a lot of individuals who are committed to do what they can do best, but it takes a team. And that means you have to have a leader, you have to have a compelling goal, you have to have a creative environment to operate in, and you have to have essentially flawless performance. If you have that, you have a winning team. And we had one for Apollo. And we managed to get one, well, more than one, for Shuttle. Had a lot of teams for Shuttle. And now here we are where the teams are sort of dispersed, focused around the individual commercial companies, and we're in a little bit of a search and find for what our next future is. It's a very interesting time. When all of that's over, places like this become the only place where you can go back and see how it really, really happened. I'm proud to be a part of this museum, and I really am delighted to have the opportunity to spend some time with you. I hope you all enjoyed it. I certainly did. Thank you, Mark.
Well, you're welcome, and it takes leaders like you, Dr. Koller, to inspire the next generation of people, and even my generation, to continually doing our best, no matter what you're doing in there. And your message is strong and well received, and we hope you've all enjoyed this Stay Curious special interview with Dr. Koller. He's been so important to the American Space Museum throughout its history. You just can't believe the things he's done behind the scenes and contributions. But more importantly, he supports the good work that Karen Conklin's doing here as our executive director and the leader of our team here. Mm-hmm. And with our board of directors that you're a part of, we feel like our future is very bright to not only preserve the birth of the American space age, but inspire that next generation of space workers.
Oh, and guess what?
What?
There's a launch tonight.
There's a launch tonight. Indeed, there is a launch tonight. And in fact, I'm going to take a telescope over to Spaceview Park and show Jupiter and Saturn off a little bit. And guess what? Tomorrow is Veterans Day. And Marty, who do we have coming? He wrote it down. John Weaver. John Weaver is here tomorrow. All right. Thank you, Marty. He knew I was going to ask that. I saw him writing that down. John Weaver is a Marine. Hoorah. Today is the 246th anniversary of the Marines, I believe. And the what?
Birthday.
Oh, birthday. Yeah, birthday. Semper Fi, Marty. And so we're going to have a Marine here, but he also was Marty's boss at Launch Process Services.
Marty needs to do
So we're going to find out what good of an employee Marty was, okay, in there tomorrow. So that's worth it sticking by here. But thank you very much, Dr. Koller. You were fastly made a major influence in my life in the few short years I've been here in Titusville. I'm honored that you're my friend and a mentor on there. And thank you, Jessica, for your work behind the scenes there. Marty, as always, thank you for you. And we want to thank again the Marie Louise G West Endowment for giving us money to do these oral histories. And that was their task, was we want more oral histories from space workers like Dr. Koller. This was certainly a good one. Tell your friends to watch it and enjoy it and rewatch it on there. So until tomorrow, when we celebrate Veterans Day, I'm Mark Marquette on behalf of Dr. Al Koller. We'll see you then to bridge the space between us.